They buried Elena Marchetti on a Tuesday, but 6 months later, her heartbeat would echo through the frozen walls of what was supposed to be her tomb. What the mourners didn't know as they threw dirt over her casket was that beneath the ice that had claimed her, a pulse still fought against the darkness, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Doctor, Sarah Chen had seen plenty of medical mysteries in her 15 years as a forensic pathologist, but nothing had prepared her for the call that came on that snowy December morning. The voice on the other end belonged to Detective Marcus Rodriguez, a man whose steady nerves she'd come to respect through dozens of cases. But today, something in his tone made her stomach clench with an unfamiliar dread. "Doc, we need you at Riverside Cemetery, Section 14, Marcus said, his words cutting through the static of the poor cell connection. "We've got a situation with the Marchetti grave. The groundskeeper called it in about an hour ago." He paused, and Sarah could hear the wind howling in the background. There are sounds coming from underground. Scratching sounds. Sarah nearly dropped her coffee cup. Elena Marchetti. The name brought back memories of one of the strangest cases she'd encountered. The 28-year-old research scientist had been found in a state of severe hypothermia after falling through the ice at Crystal Lake during a solo camping trip. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, they couldn't detect vital signs. Sarah had performed the autopsy herself, and while something had felt off about the whole situation, she'd ultimately signed the death certificate. The cause of death: drowning complicated by severe hypothermia. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Now 6 months later, the family had commissioned a beautiful marble headstone to replace the temporary marker. The groundskeeper, an elderly man named Tom Fletcher, who'd been tending graves for over 30 years, had been preparing the site when he heard something that made his blood run cold. At first he thought it might be an animal that had somehow gotten trapped beneath the heavy stone. But as he pressed his ear closer to the ground, the sounds became unmistakably human. The cemetery looked like something out of a Gothic novel as ancient oak trees, their branches heavy with snow, cast long shadows across the weathered headstones. The December air was bitter, cutting through her coat and sending shivers down her spine. She could see her breath forming small clouds as she walked quickly toward the gathering of police cars and emergency vehicles that surrounded Elena's grave. Detective Rodriguez met her halfway, his usually composed demeanor cracked with concern. "It gets worse, Doc," he said, falling into step beside her. "Tom Fletcher says he's been hearing these sounds for 3 days now. He thought he was losing his mind, so he didn't report it immediately. But this morning, they got louder, more desperate." As they approached the gravesite, Sarah could see Tom Fletcher standing nearby, wrapped in a thick winter coat, his weathered face pale with shock. The old groundskeeper had seen everything in his decades of work, but this was clearly beyond anything in his experience. Several police officers had secured the perimeter, and Sarah noticed that one of the younger cops looked distinctly green around the gills. The headstone was beautiful, carved from white marble with Elena's name, dates, and a simple inscription that read, "Beloved daughter and brilliant scientist, forever in our hearts." Fresh flowers, now wilted and brown from the cold, lay scattered around the base, but it was what lay beneath that commanded everyone's attention. Marcus knelt down next to the headstone and gestured for Sarah to join him. "Put your ear to the ground right here," he said, pointing to a spot near the head of the grave. "Listen carefully." Sarah's heart was pounding as she lowered herself to the frozen earth. The cold immediately seeped through her clothes, but she ignored the discomfort and pressed her ear against the ground. For a moment she heard nothing but the wind rustling through the bare branches above. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was rhythmic, desperate, and undeniably coming from below. Sarah jerked back, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. "How is this possible?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "I examined her myself. She was dead. I'm absolutely certain she was dead." But even as she spoke the words, doubt began to creep into her mind. There had been something strange about Elena's case from the beginning. The woman had been an expert in cryobiology, studying the effects of extreme cold on living organisms. Her research focused on understanding how certain animals could survive being frozen solid, essentially coming back to life when thawed. It was cutting-edge science, the kind of work that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. Marcus was already on his radio, calling for excavation equipment. "We need to get her out of there now," he said urgently. "Whatever's happening down there, someone is running out of time." The irony of his words wasn't lost on anyone present. If Elena Marchetti was somehow alive down there, she had been buried for nearly 6 months. The human body couldn't survive that long without food, water, or oxygen. Could it? The emergency excavation began within an hour, transforming the peaceful cemetery into a scene of controlled chaos. Sarah watched as the mechanical digger carefully removed layers of frozen earth, each scoop bringing them closer to answers that defied everything she thought she knew about life and death. The scratching sounds had grown weaker since their arrival, adding an urgency that made everyone work faster despite the treacherous conditions. Elena's parents, Margaret and Robert Marchetti, arrived just as the excavation team hit the concrete burial vault. Margaret collapsed against her husband when she heard the sounds for herself, her sobs echoing across the cemetery. "How could we have buried our daughter alive?" she kept repeating, the words a knife through everyone's heart. Robert, a retired engineer, stood in stunned silence, his analytical mind struggling to process the impossible situation unfolding before them. Dr. Chen found herself reviewing every detail of Elena's autopsy in her mind. She had been meticulous, as always. No pulse, no breathing, no response to painful stimuli. The woman had been pulled from Crystal Lake after being submerged in near-freezing water for an estimated 2 hours. Her core body temperature had dropped to 68 degrees Fahrenheit when the paramedics found her. At that temperature, brain death was inevitable, or so conventional medical wisdom dictated. But Elena Marchetti wasn't conventional. Her research at the Northern Institute of Biological Sciences had been groundbreaking. She had been working on a project called adaptive hibernation, studying how to induce controlled hypothermic states in humans for medical procedures and potentially space travel. Her laboratory notebooks, which Sarah had reviewed during the initial investigation, contained detailed studies of arched ground squirrels, wood frogs, and other creatures capable of surviving complete freezing. The breakthrough moment came when the excavation team finally reached the casket. The sounds from below had stopped entirely 20 minutes earlier, creating a terrifying silence that made everyone fear they were too late. The mahogany casket, expensive and supposedly built to last for decades, showed signs of damage. Long scratches marked the interior lid, and the satin lining was torn in several places. "She's been trying to get out," whispered Father Michael O'Connor, the priest who had performed Elena's funeral service. The elderly clergyman had insisted on being present, feeling responsible for his role in what might have been a premature burial. His face was ashen as he stared at the evidence of Elena's struggle for survival. When they finally opened the casket, the sight that greeted them challenged every assumption about human biology. Elena Marchetti lay inside, her body positioned differently than how she had been placed for burial. Her fingertips were bloody from clawing at the casket lid, but she was unmistakably breathing. Her skin had a strange, almost translucent quality, and her body temperature registered at an impossible 45 degrees Fahrenheit on the emergency medical technician's thermometer. "She's alive, but barely," announced EMT supervisor Linda Torres, as she checked Elena's vital signs. "Pulse is extremely weak, maybe 15 beats per minute. Breathing is so shallow I can barely detect it. Her body temperature is incompatible with life according to everything I know, but here she is." Linda had 20 years of experience in but she had never encountered anything like this. The most shocking discovery came when they examined Elena's fingernails. Mixed with the blood from her desperate scratching was a strange crystalline substance that seemed to glow faintly in the dim winter light. Dr. Chen collected samples immediately, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. "This isn't normal ice," she observed, studying the crystals under a portable microscope. "The molecular structure appears to be different somehow." As the ambulance rushed Elena to Northern General Hospital, Sarah rode alongside, monitoring the woman who had somehow survived 6 months in a state that should have been death. Elena's breathing remained steady but minimal, her pulse a ghostly whisper of life. Most disturbing was her skin temperature, which seemed to fluctuate between normal human warmth and the icy cold of the grave. Dr. Amanda Phillips, the hospital's chief of emergency medicine, was waiting when they arrived. Sarah had called ahead to brief her on the impossible situation, but even the veteran doctor was unprepared for what she saw. "In 30 years of medicine, I've never seen anything like this," she admitted as they transferred Elena to the ICU. Her cellular activity appears to be operating at about 10% of normal levels. It's as if her entire metabolism has been dramatically slowed. The medical team worked quickly to stabilize Elena while trying to understand her condition. Her blood work revealed several anomalies that defied medical explanation. Her electrolyte levels were severely imbalanced, but not in ways that would typically be fatal. More puzzling was the presence of unknown proteins in her bloodstream, compounds that didn't appear in any medical database. Meanwhile, Detective Rodriguez was coordinating with the coroner's office to review the original investigation. Elena's camping equipment had been recovered from Crystal Lake, but certain items mentioned in her research notes were never found. Specifically, she had been carrying experimental compounds from her laboratory, substances designed to help induce controlled hypothermic states. As Elena lay unconscious in the ICU, connected to machines that barely registered her slowed vital signs, the questions multiplied. How had she survived being buried alive for 6 months? What was the strange crystalline substance found under her fingernails? And most importantly, had this been an accident, or had Elena Marchetti somehow planned this impossible survival? The answers would prove more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. Elena's laboratory at the Northern Institute of Biological Sciences revealed secrets that made Dr. Chen's skin crawl with both fascination and horror. 3 days after the exhumation, Sarah stood in the sterile white workspace where Elena had conducted her final experiments, trying to understand how a brilliant scientist had become her own test subject in the most extreme way possible. The lab was exactly as Elena had left it the night before her camping trip. Research papers covered every surface, filled with calculations and diagrams that hurt Sarah's head to decipher. But it was Elena's personal journal, locked in her desk drawer, that contained the revelations that would change everything they thought they knew about the limits of human survival. Dr. Michael Hartwell, Elena's research supervisor and mentor, stood beside Sarah as she read through the journal entries with growing amazement and dread. The distinguished professor had worked with Elena for 3 years and considered her one of the most brilliant minds he'd ever encountered. "I had no idea she was this close to a breakthrough," he admitted, his voice thick with guilt. "If I had known what she was planning," Elena's final journal entries painted a picture of a scientist pushed to the edge by her obsession with unlocking the secrets of controlled hibernation. For months she had been experimenting with synthetic compounds designed to induce hibernation-like states in human subjects. Her research was based on naturally occurring antifreeze proteins found in Arctic fish and insects, but she had modified them in ways that pushed the boundaries of ethical science. The journal entry dated 2 days before her disappearance was particularly chilling. "The synthetic cryoprotectant solutions are finally stable. My calculations suggest that a human subject could survive extended periods in sub-freezing conditions with minimal metabolic activity. The risks are enormous, but the potential benefits for emergency medicine and space exploration are too significant to ignore. Sometimes science requires the ultimate sacrifice, but it was the final entry that made Sarah's blood run cold. I've prepared 3 vials of the enhanced cryoprotectant. If my theories are correct, this could revolutionize our understanding of death itself. Crystal Lake will provide the perfect controlled environment for the first human trial. I only hope that when they find me, someone will be intelligent enough to understand what I've accomplished." Dr. Hartwell sank into Elena's desk chair, the weight of realization hitting him. "She didn't fall through the ice accidentally," he said quietly. "She went to Crystal Lake to test her compounds on herself. She planned her own death and resurrection." The laboratory contained detailed blueprints of Crystal Lake, including depth measurements and temperature readings Elena had collected over several months. She had identified the exact location where the water was deep enough to ensure rapid hypothermia, but shallow enough that her body would eventually be found. Her research showed she had timed her experiment for the coldest night of the winter, when the lake temperature would be just above freezing. Sarah discovered 3 empty vials in Elena's laboratory equipment, exactly matching the description in her journal. Chemical analysis revealed traces of synthetic proteins unlike anything in the medical literature. These compounds appear to alter how cells respond to freezing, explained Dr. Lisa Chang, the hospital's biochemist who had been analyzing Elena's blood samples. Instead of forming destructive ice crystals that would kill the cells, her body seems to have formed protective crystalline structures that preserve cellular function. The most disturbing discovery came when they analyzed the crystalline substance found under Elena's fingernails in the casket. It wasn't ordinary ice or even the antifreeze proteins from her bloodstream. It was something else entirely, a hybrid crystal that seemed to pulse with its own energy. Under high-powered microscopes, the crystals appeared to move and reshape themselves, almost as if they were alive. Elena's condition in the hospital remained stable but mysterious. She had been unconscious for 4 days, her body temperature slowly rising toward normal human levels. The medical team had decided to let her warm naturally rather than risk shocking her system with rapid rewarming procedures. Her brain scans showed unusual but consistent activity, suggesting she was not in a coma but rather in some kind of controlled hibernation state. Dr. Phillips had consulted with colleagues around the world, but no one had ever encountered a case like Elena's. Her cellular metabolism is gradually increasing, she reported to the growing team of specialists who had been brought in to study the case. It's as if her body is slowly coming back online, system by system. Her kidney function resumed yesterday, and her liver enzymes are approaching normal levels. The media had gotten wind of the story, despite efforts to keep it quiet. News vans lined the street outside Northern General Hospital, and reporters pressed for details about the miracle resurrection. The hospital administration was fielding calls from scientists, religious leaders, and government officials who wanted to understand how Elena had achieved the impossible. But it was Elena's parents who were struggling the most with the implications of their daughter's experiment. Margaret Marchetti sat vigil beside Elena's hospital bed, torn between relief that her daughter was alive and horror at what she had endured. How could she do this to herself? She whispered to Sarah during one of her visits. How could she put us through the agony of losing her when she knew she might survive? Robert Marchetti approached the situation with his engineer's mindset, poring over Elena's research and trying to understand the scientific implications. If her theories are correct, he told Dr. Hartwell, this could change emergency medicine forever. Patients who are declared dead from hypothermia or drowning might actually be savable if they're treated with her compounds. As Elena's 5th day in the hospital dawned, the medical team detected the first signs that she might be awakening from her hibernation state. Her brain activity increased noticeably, and she began showing responses to external stimuli. Dr. Phillips predicted that Elena would regain consciousness within the next 24 hours. When she did wake up, the questions she would face would be as challenging as the scientific breakthrough she had achieved. Had she committed a form of elaborate suicide? Was her experiment ethical? And most importantly, what other secrets lay hidden in her research that might forever change the boundary between life and death? Elena's eyes opened at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, exactly 7 days after her exhumation. Dr. Sarah Chen was the only person in the room when it happened, having volunteered for the overnight watch after Elena's brain activity had spiked dramatically the evening before. The first thing Elena said was not a word but a number, 73. 73 what? Sarah asked gently, leaning closer to Elena's bedside. The young scientist's voice was barely a whisper, her throat damaged from months of minimal breathing and the crystalline formations that had somehow sustained her during her hibernation. Days, Elena managed to croak. I was conscious for 73 days before the hibernation became complete. I could hear everything, the funeral, my parents crying, the dirt hitting the casket. Her eyes filled with tears as the magnitude of her experience began to register. I tried to call out, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I could only scratch at the wood and hope someone would hear.
The revelation that Elena had been partially aware during the early stages of her burial sent shockwaves through the medical team. Dr. Phillips immediately ordered a complete neurological evaluation, wanting to understand how Elena's consciousness had survived such an extended period of severe hypothermia. The human brain isn't supposed to function at the temperatures your body maintained, she explained to Elena. Yet somehow, you retained awareness and memory formation. Elena's recovery progressed rapidly once she fully awakened. Her body temperature normalized within hours, and her metabolic functions returned to near normal levels with remarkable speed. But it was her mental state that concerned everyone the most. The psychological trauma of experiencing her own burial and the grief of her family had left deep scars that would require extensive therapy to heal. Dr. Jessica Morrison, the hospital's chief psychiatrist, spent hours with Elena in those first days, trying to assess the psychological impact of her ordeal. Elena exhibits symptoms consistent with severe trauma, she explained to the medical team. But there's something else, something I can't quite categorize. She speaks about her experience with a detachment that's almost scientific, as if she was observing herself from the outside. Elena insisted on reviewing her research notes and laboratory findings even before she was physically stable enough to leave her hospital bed. You don't understand, she told Dr. Hartwell, when he tried to convince her to focus on her recovery. This wasn't just about proving that human hibernation was possible. I discovered something much more significant during those months underground. When Elena was finally strong enough to sit up and speak clearly, she requested a meeting with the entire medical team, her parents, and Detective Rodriguez. I need to explain what really happened, she said, her voice stronger, but still carrying the haunting quality of someone who had been to the edge of death and returned. Because what I learned down there changes everything we know about consciousness and survival. The meeting took place in a conference room on the 7th floor of Northern General Hospital. Elena, still connected to monitoring equipment but insisting on being present, faced the group of people who had worked so hard to save her. Outside, snow fell steadily, a reminder of the winter that had made her experiment possible. I want to start by apologizing, Elena began, looking directly at her parents. I never intended for you to suffer the way you did. I thought I had calculated everything perfectly, that I would revive naturally after a few weeks and everyone would understand what I had accomplished. I never imagined it would take 6 months or that I would remain partially conscious for so long. Margaret Marchetti wiped tears from her eyes but nodded for her daughter to continue. Robert leaned forward, his engineer's mind eager to understand the technical aspects of what Elena had achieved. The cryoprotectant compounds worked better than I had hoped, Elena continued. They didn't just prevent cellular damage from freezing, they created an entirely new form of cellular suspension that maintained basic neurological function while reducing metabolic needs to almost nothing. In essence, I created a state that exists between life and death. Dr. Chen interrupted with a crucial question. Elena, the crystalline substance we found under your fingernails wasn't from your original compounds. What was it? Elena's expression grew troubled. That's what I discovered during my hibernation. The compounds I injected began to evolve, to change at the molecular level. They were interacting with my cellular DNA in ways I hadn't predicted. Those crystals weren't just preserving my life, they were enhancing it, improving it, in ways that terrify me. She pulled back the sleeve of her hospital gown, revealing her arm. Her skin had a subtle, almost imperceptible luminescence, and the veins beneath appeared more defined than normal. My body temperature can now fluctuate between normal human levels and near freezing without any adverse effects. My reaction times have improved by 30%, and my oxygen needs have decreased by half. The compounds didn't just save my life, they fundamentally altered my biology. Dr. Phillips leaned forward, fascinated despite the ethical implications. Are you saying that your experiment accidentally created a form of human enhancement? Not accidentally, Elena replied grimly. I found detailed notes in my father's old research files after I woke up. He was involved in classified government research in the 1980s, working on enhancing human performance for military applications. He never told me, but some of his theoretical work formed the basis for my cryoprotectant formulations. Robert Marchetti's face went pale. Elena, I never meant for you to find those files. That research was discontinued because it was deemed too dangerous. The compounds we were developing had unpredictable effects on human subjects. The room fell silent as the implications of Elena's revelation sank in. She hadn't just survived an impossible ordeal, she had undergone a transformation that might have been the goal of her research all along. The question now was whether Elena Marchetti was still entirely human, or if she had become something else during her time buried beneath the ice.
2 weeks after Elena's awakening, black SUVs began appearing in the hospital parking lot. Dr. Chen first noticed them on a Thursday morning when she arrived for her shift, their tinted windows and government plates, a stark contrast to the civilian vehicles scattered throughout the lot. By noon, men in dark suits were walking the hospital corridors, their presence setting everyone on edge. Agent Victoria Nash of the Department of Defense's Biological Research Division introduced herself to Dr. Phillips with credentials that commanded immediate respect and growing concern. "We need to speak with Elena Marchetti," she stated simply, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Her research touches on classified projects that fall under national security. Elena had been preparing for discharge, her physical recovery remarkably complete after just 2 weeks. Her enhanced biology was healing at an accelerated rate, and her metabolic functions had stabilized at levels that amazed the medical team. But the arrival of government agents changed everything, transforming Elena from a patient into something more complicated, a potential asset. "My daughter isn't going anywhere with you people," Margaret Marchetti declared, when Agent Nash explained that Elena needed to be debriefed at a secure facility. "She's been through enough trauma. She needs time to recover and readjust to normal life." But Elena herself seemed oddly unsurprised by the government's interest. "I've been expecting this," she told her parents privately after the initial meeting with Agent Nash. "The moment I decided to use my father's research as the foundation for my compounds, I knew this day would come. Some knowledge is too dangerous to remain in civilian hands." Agent Nash's team included Dr. Colonel James Patterson, a military physician who specialized in human performance enhancement, and Dr. Rebecca Torres, a biochemist whose security clearance was higher than anyone at the hospital had ever encountered. They examined Elena's medical records with the intensity of people looking for specific information rather than general curiosity. "The compounds your daughter created, Dr. Patterson explained to Robert Marchetti during a tense family meeting, represent a breakthrough that could revolutionize battlefield medicine and human survival in extreme conditions, but they also pose significant risks if they fell into the wrong hands." Elena's laboratory at the Northern Institute had been sealed by federal agents within hours of the government's arrival. Dr. Hartwell was escorted from the building and informed that his access was suspended pending a complete security review. "They're treating Elena's research like it's a weapon," he told Sarah over coffee at a diner outside the hospital. "Maybe it is." The most disturbing revelation came when Agent Nash revealed that Elena's father's old research hadn't been discontinued as Robert had claimed. Project Icarus continued in secret for 15 years after the official termination, she informed the family. "Your daughter's work represents the successful completion of objectives that we'd been pursuing for decades." Elena's transformation was becoming more pronounced with each passing day. Her ability to control her body temperature had expanded to the point where she could withstand exposure to freezing conditions without any protective clothing. Her reflexes and cognitive processing had improved dramatically, and she required only 3 hours of sleep per night to function at peak efficiency. "I'm not the same person who went to Crystal Lake 6 months ago," Elena admitted to Dr. Morrison during one of their therapy sessions. "Sometimes I can hear conversations happening 3 rooms away. I can process complex mathematical calculations in my head faster than most computers. The compounds didn't just preserve my life, they upgraded it." The government's interest extended beyond Elena herself to anyone who had been involved in her care or research. Dr. Chen was subjected to hours of questioning about her examination of Elena's body and the crystalline substances found in the casket. Detective Rodriguez was debriefed about the investigation and sworn to secrecy under the Official Secrets Act. Elena's blood samples, which had been stored at the hospital for further study, were confiscated by federal agents. Dr. Chang's biochemical analysis was classified, and her research notes were seized. "They're treating this like Elena discovered the formula for creating superhumans," Dr. Phillips confided to Sarah, and maybe she did. The pressure on Elena to cooperate with the government became intense. Agent Nash made it clear that Elena's research had implications for national security that went far beyond her personal experience. "Other countries are undoubtedly working on similar enhancement projects," she explained during a formal interview. "If we don't understand and control this technology, our enemies will." Elena's parents found themselves caught between protecting their daughter and recognizing the broader implications of her discovery. Robert's old security clearance was reactivated, and he was brought in to consult on Elena's compounds. "The applications for military use are obvious," he told his wife privately. "Soldiers who could survive in Arctic conditions without special equipment, who could function for days without sleep or food." Elena may have created the ultimate weapon, but Elena herself was struggling with the ethical implications of her achievement. "I wanted to help people," she told her father. "I imagined this technology being used to save hypothermia victims or help patients survive complex surgeries. I never intended to create enhanced soldiers." The government's interest reached a crescendo when Elena demonstrated the full extent of her abilities during a controlled test. In a specially prepared chamber cooled to -40°F, Elena remained comfortable wearing only light clothing for over an hour. Her vital signs remained stable, and she showed no signs of distress or impairment. "We're not just talking about cold resistance," Dr. Patterson reported to his superiors. "Elena Marchetti has achieved a fundamental alteration of human physiology that represents the next step in human evolution. The question is whether this evolution can be controlled and replicated." As Elena faced the choice between cooperating with the government or risking having her research weaponized without her input, she realized that her experiment had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams and created a nightmare that would haunt her for the rest of her unnaturally extended life. Elena's decision to cooperate with the government came with conditions that sparked heated debates in the highest levels of the Department of Defense. She agreed to work with their research team, but only if she retained control over how her discoveries were implemented, and if the research remained focused on medical applications rather than military enhancement. Dr. Rebecca Torres led the government research team at a classified facility outside Washington, D.C., where Elena was installed in a state-of-the-art laboratory that rivaled anything she had worked with at the Northern Institute. The facility, known only as Site 7, had been designed specifically for high-risk biological research, with containment protocols that could isolate dangerous experiments from the outside world. Elena's first weeks at Site 7 were spent replicating her original compounds under controlled conditions. But the results were inconsistent and troubling. When the synthetic cryoprotectants were tested on laboratory animals, the outcomes varied wildly. Some subjects achieved suspended animation similar to Elena's experience, while others suffered cellular breakdown and death. A few developed aggressive behavioral changes that concerned everyone involved. The compounds seemed to interact differently with each individual's genetic makeup. Elena explained to Dr. Torres during one of their daily briefings, "What worked for me might be lethal for someone else." The enhancement effects appear to be tied to specific DNA sequences that we don't fully understand yet. The ethical committee overseeing the research included bioethicists, military advisors, and civilian oversight representatives. Dr. Amanda Richardson, the committee's chair, raised concerns about the human testing that would be necessary to understand Elena's compounds. "We're essentially talking about experimenting on human subjects with substances that could fundamentally alter their biology," she pointed out during a heated session. The potential for abuse is enormous. Elena found herself caught between scientific curiosity and moral responsibility. Her enhanced abilities continued to develop, presenting new ethical dilemmas daily. She could now perceive electromagnetic fields, allowing her to sense electronic devices and even predict changes in weather patterns. Her cellular regeneration had accelerated to the point where minor injuries healed within hours. "I'm becoming something that shouldn't exist," Elena confided to Dr. Morrison during their video therapy sessions. The psychiatrist had been granted security clearance to continue Elena's psychological care, recognizing that her mental health was crucial to the research's success. Every day I can do things that normal humans can't. At what point do I stop being human and become something else? The breakthrough that changed everything came when Elena's blood samples were analyzed by Dr. Michael Chen, a geneticist specializing in evolutionary biology. Hidden within her enhanced DNA were markers that suggested her transformation wasn't random but followed specific evolutionary pathways. It's as if the compounds activated dormant genetic sequences, he explained to the research team. Elena's body is expressing traits that humans might have developed naturally over thousands of years of evolution. This discovery raised disturbing questions about the compound's origin. When Elena's father was brought in for extended debriefing, he revealed that the original research had been based on genetic material recovered from archaeological sites in Siberia. We found preserved tissue samples in permafrost that contained DNA sequences unlike anything in modern humans, Robert admitted reluctantly. The compounds were designed to activate those sequences in contemporary subjects. Elena's reaction to this revelation was a mixture of fascination and horror. You're telling me that my enhancement is based on genetic material from ancient humans who were naturally adapted to extreme cold, she asked her father, that I'm expressing traits from our evolutionary ancestors. The implications were staggering. If Elena's compounds could activate dormant evolutionary traits, they might represent a way to access humanity's full genetic potential. But the risks were equally enormous. The research team had no way of predicting which traits might be activated or how they might interact with modern human physiology. Agent Nash pushed for accelerated testing despite the ethical concerns. Other nations are undoubtedly pursuing similar research, she argued during committee meetings. If we don't move forward, we risk falling behind in what could be the most significant military advancement since nuclear weapons. But Elena's own experiences were providing cautionary evidence about the dangers of rapid enhancement. She had begun experiencing episodes where her consciousness seemed to expand beyond her physical body, a side effect that suggested the compounds were affecting her brain in unexpected ways. Sometimes I feel like I'm connected to something larger, she told Dr. Richardson. It's not entirely unpleasant, but it's definitely not normal human experience. The psychological evaluation of Elena's condition revealed additional concerns. Her enhanced cognitive abilities were accompanied by a gradual emotional detachment that worried Dr. Morrison. Elena's becoming less connected to normal human emotional responses, she reported to the Oversight Committee. The compounds may be trading enhanced physical and mental capabilities for reduced empathy and social connection. Elena's parents visited Site 7 monthly, but each visit revealed how dramatically their daughter was changing. Margaret struggled to connect with Elena's increasingly analytical approach to conversations, while Robert found himself fascinated by the technical aspects of his daughter's transformation despite his concerns about her humanity. I love my daughter, but I'm not sure she's still my daughter, Margaret confided to Dr. Chen during one visit. She looks the same mostly, but when she talks about her experiences, it's like listening to an alien describing human behavior from the outside. The research team faced a crucial decision point when Elena's analysis revealed that her compounds could theoretically be modified to produce different types of enhancement. We could create versions that enhance strength, speed, cognitive function, or sensory perception, she explained to Dr. Torres. But each modification carries its own risks and ethical implications. As Elena continued to evolve beyond normal human parameters, the question that haunted everyone involved was whether they were witnessing the next step in human evolution or creating a monster that would ultimately threaten humanity itself. 3 months into Elena's work at Site 7, the first security breach occurred in a way no one had anticipated. Elena herself became the breach when her enhanced abilities allowed her to access classified computer systems simply by placing her hand on electronic interfaces. Her bioelectric field, altered by the compounds, could interface directly with digital networks. Dr. Torres discovered Elena's newfound ability during a routine data transfer when she noticed the young scientist downloading terabytes of information without touching a keyboard.
Elena, step away from the terminal immediately, she ordered, but Elena seemed to be in a trance-like state. Her consciousness merged with the computer system. When Elena finally disconnected, her eyes held a knowledge that terrified everyone present. I've seen the other projects, she said quietly. Project Lazarus, Project Phoenix, Project Prometheus. You're not just researching my compounds, you're developing an entire arsenal of human enhancement technologies. The revelation that Elena could access classified networks mentally sent shockwaves through the facility's security protocols. Agent Nash implemented immediate containment measures, but Elena's abilities were evolving faster than their countermeasures could adapt. She's becoming a living security risk, Nash confided to her superiors. We may need to consider termination protocols. Elena's enhanced hearing allowed her to overhear the termination discussion from 3 floors away. That night she made a decision that would change everything. Using her newfound digital interface abilities, she began copying and transmitting her research data to external locations, creating multiple backup repositories that would ensure her work couldn't be buried or weaponized without proper oversight. Dr. Richardson, the ethics committee chair, received Elena's transmitted data along with a personal message. The research has exceeded all ethical boundaries. They're planning to create enhanced soldiers using unwilling subjects. I've included evidence of forced human experimentation and cover-ups. Please help me stop this before it's too late. The evidence Elena provided was damning. Secret facilities around the country were testing variations of her compounds on military volunteers who hadn't been fully informed of the risks. Several subjects had died, while others had suffered psychological breaks that left them in permanent psychiatric care. The government had been pursuing Elena's research regardless of the human cost. Elena's parents received a similar data package, along with a message that broke their hearts. I'm no longer the daughter you raised. The compounds have changed me in ways that make normal human relationships impossible. I can feel myself becoming more detached from humanity with each passing day. I need to expose what's happening here before I lose the last traces of my conscience. Dr. Morrison's analysis of Elena's psychological state supported her self-assessment. Elena is experiencing a form of controlled sociopathy, she reported to anyone who would listen. Her emotional responses are becoming increasingly analytical rather than empathetic. She's losing her connection to human suffering, which makes her both more efficient and more dangerous. The facility's containment efforts proved futile against Elena's evolving abilities. She could now manipulate electromagnetic fields to disable security systems, and her enhanced physical capabilities allowed her to move through the facility undetected. When she wanted to leave Site 7, no force on Earth could have stopped her. Elena's escape occurred on a Tuesday evening during a simulated emergency drill. She simply walked out through multiple security checkpoints, her electromagnetic abilities convincing the electronic systems that she belonged there. By the time anyone realized she was gone, Elena had vanished into the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. The manhunt for Elena involved every federal agency with jurisdiction, but they were hunting someone whose capabilities exceeded their understanding. Elena could survive in conditions that would kill normal humans, access information systems that should have been impenetrable, and move through urban environments with superhuman stealth and efficiency. Elena's first stop was the Washington Post, where she met with investigative journalist David Kim. The evidence she provided documented years of illegal human experimentation and the development of enhancement technologies that violated international treaties. This isn't just about military applications, she told Kim. They're creating a new class of humans that could ultimately replace normal humanity. The story broke on a Friday morning, sending shockwaves through the government and scientific communities. Elena's documentation proved that the enhancement research had produced dozens of subjects with various capabilities, many of whom were being held in secure facilities without their consent. The public outcry was immediate and intense. Agent Nash found herself testifying before Congress within a week, struggling to explain how a civilian scientist had gained access to the most classified research programs in the country. Elena Marchetti's has become an existential threat to national security, she argued. Her abilities and knowledge make her potentially more dangerous than any foreign agent, but Elena was already several steps ahead of her pursuers. Using her digital interface abilities, she had been coordinating with other enhanced subjects around the world, many of whom had been created by similar research programs in different countries. They formed a network of individuals who existed outside normal human society and governmental control. Dr. Hartwell, Elena's former mentor, received a visit from her 3 weeks after her escape. She appeared in his office at the Northern Institute without triggering any security alarms, her enhanced ability allowing her to bypass every detection system. "I need you to help me destroy the remaining samples of my compounds," she told him. "Before they create more people like me." Elena's transformation was now so complete that she barely resembled the woman who had emerged from Crystal Lake months earlier. Her skin had taken on a permanently luminescent quality, and her eyes reflected light like those of a nocturnal predator. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate at frequencies that made normal humans uncomfortable. "The compounds don't just enhance human capabilities," Elena explained to Dr. Hartwell. "They're changing us into something that views ordinary humans the way we might view insects. I can feel my empathy disappearing more each day. Soon I won't care about human suffering at all." As Elena prepared to implement her plan to destroy the enhancement research, she faced the terrifying realization that she might already be too late. The changes in her psychology were accelerating, and she could feel her last connections to humanity slipping away. The question was whether she could complete her mission before she lost the motivation to protect the species she was no longer truly part of.
Elena's revelation about other enhanced subjects around the world proved to be more extensive and terrifying than anyone had imagined. Through her digital interface abilities, she had discovered that at least 12 countries had been pursuing human enhancement research based on stolen or independently developed versions of her father's original work. The network she had uncovered included Markus Petrov, a former Russian Special Forces operative who had undergone enhancement procedures that gave him superhuman strength and endurance. Chen Wei, a Chinese scientist whose experiments had resulted in enhanced cognitive abilities that allowed her to process information at computer-like speeds. And Dr. Sarah Okafor, a Nigerian researcher whose compounds had given her subjects enhanced sensory perception that bordered on precognition. Each enhanced individual Elena contacted shared similar stories of government exploitation and the gradual loss of their humanity. "We are becoming something new," Marcus told Elena during one of their encrypted communications. "But this evolution comes at a cost that normal humans cannot understand." Elena's meeting with Dr. Hartwell at the Northern Institute was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Chen, who had been monitoring the facility since Elena's escape. "Your former student has become the focal point of an international crisis," she told Hartwell. "Every intelligence agency in the world is trying to capture or kill her." The revelation that Elena was coordinating with enhanced subjects from hostile nations elevated her threat level to the highest possible classification. Agent Nash received authorization to use lethal force, viewing Elena not as an American citizen but as a weapon that had fallen into enemy hands. Elena's plan to destroy the enhancement research required accessing laboratories and storage facilities across multiple continents. Her network of enhanced allies made this possible, but it also revealed the true scope of what they were fighting against. The research had progressed far beyond Elena's original compounds. Dr. Okafor's research in Lagos had produced subjects who could survive in toxic environments that would be lethal to normal humans. Chen Wei's laboratory in Beijing had created individuals with enhanced healing abilities that bordered on immortality. Markus Petrov's handlers in Moscow had developed compounds that could enhance human aggression and reduce empathy to create perfect soldiers. "We are not the first," Elena realized during a video conference with her enhanced allies. "This research has been ongoing for decades, possibly centuries. We represent the latest iteration in a long-term project to create post-human beings." The evidence Elena and her network uncovered suggested that the enhancement research was being coordinated by an international organization that operated above government level. Secret facilities existed on every continent, funded by a combination of military contracts and private investment from individuals who saw enhanced humans as the next step in evolution. Elena's psychological deterioration was accelerating as she coordinated the destruction of research facilities around the world. Her emotional responses had become so muted that she could plan the deaths of security personnel and researchers without feeling any moral conflict. "I understand now why they call us post-human," she told Dr. Morrison during their final therapy session. "We retain human memories and knowledge but not human values." The first major facility to be destroyed was Dr. Okafor's laboratory in Lagos. Using her enhanced abilities, Elena infiltrated the complex and eliminated the security systems while Dr. Okafor's team destroyed decades of research and terminated the enhanced subjects who were too far gone to be saved. The explosion was visible from orbit. Chen Wei's facility in Beijing fell next, though the Chinese government's response was swift and brutal. Enhanced subjects who had been cooperating with Elena were hunted down by military units equipped with weapons specifically designed to counter superhuman abilities. The conflict between enhanced humans and normal military forces marked the beginning of a new kind of warfare. Elena's assault on Site 7 was personal. She returned to the facility where she had been studied and exploited, but her enhanced abilities now made her essentially unstoppable by conventional security measures. She moved through the complex like a force of nature, shutting down experiments and destroying research with methodical efficiency. Agent Nash confronted Elena in the facility's main laboratory, armed with experimental weapons designed to incapacitate enhanced subjects. "You're destroying the future of human evolution," Nash argued as they faced each other across banks of humming computers. "These enhancements could help humanity survive in an increasingly hostile universe." "You're not enhancing humanity," Elena replied, her voice carrying those unsettling harmonics that made normal humans instinctively afraid. "You're replacing it with something that doesn't care about human suffering." "Look at me, Agent Nash. Do you see anything human left in my eyes?" The battle between Elena and the facility's defenses was brief and decisive. Her electromagnetic abilities allowed her to turn their own security systems against them, while her enhanced physical capabilities made her essentially invulnerable to their weapons. When she left Site 7, the facility was a burning ruin. Markus Petrov's assault on the Moscow facility coincided with Elena's attack, but the Russian government's response was more extreme. They deployed tactical nuclear weapons rather than allow the enhanced human to escape with their research. Markus's fate remained unknown, but the mushroom cloud over the Siberian research complex suggested he had either died in the blast or absorbed radiation levels that would kill normal humans. Elena's parents watched the news coverage of the worldwide attacks with growing horror and pride. Their daughter had become a terrorist in the eyes of most governments, but she was fighting to prevent the creation of more beings like herself. "She's saving humanity from us," Margaret told Robert as they watched footage of Elena walking away from the burning remains of Site 7. As Elena prepared for the final phase of her mission, destroying the original research data and samples stored in deep underground facilities, she faced the reality that her actions had likely doomed her to eternal isolation. The enhanced humans who survived would be hunted forever, too dangerous to integrate with normal society and too valuable to be left alone. The question that haunted Elena as she planned her final missions was whether her actions were motivated by her remaining humanity or by the cold calculation of a post-human mind that saw normal humans as a threat to be managed rather than a species to be protected. The deepest research facility lay buried beneath the Colorado mountains, 3 miles underground in a complex that had been designed to survive nuclear war. Elena's journey to reach it required her to traverse harsh mountain terrain in the dead of winter, conditions that would have killed her original human form but barely inconvenienced her enhanced physiology. Dr. Colonel Patterson had anticipated Elena's eventual arrival at the Cheyenne Mountain facility. He had spent months developing what he called the final protocol, a last resort plan to either capture or eliminate the enhanced humans who had become humanity's greatest threat. The facility's defenses had been specifically designed to counter Elena's known abilities. Elena's approach was detected by satellite surveillance hours before she reached the mountain. The facility went into full lockdown, sealing blast doors that could withstand direct nuclear strikes and activating defensive systems that turned the complex into an impregnable fortress. But Elena's abilities had continued to evolve during her months of freedom. The electromagnetic pulse she generated while still miles from the facility disabled most of the electronic surveillance systems. Her enhanced senses allowed her to perceive the complex's layout through solid rock, mapping air circulation systems and power conduits that conventional blueprints couldn't reveal. By the time she reached the outer perimeter, Elena had identified 17 different ways to penetrate the facility's defenses. Patterson monitored Elena's approach from the facility's command center, watching thermal sensors track a heat signature that seemed to shift and change in ways that defied physics. "She's not just enhanced," he told his security team. "She's become something that operates by different physical laws than normal humans." Elena's infiltration began with something none of the defenders had anticipated. She simply walked through the mountain itself. Her enhanced cellular structure allowed her to briefly achieve a state of matter that could pass through solid rock, an ability that suggested the compounds had unlocked aspects of human potential that bordered on the supernatural. When Elena materialized inside the facility's main vault, she found herself face to face with the complete archive of enhancement research dating back to the 1940s. Thousands of test subjects, hundreds of research projects, and decades of human experimentation were documented in files that filled an entire underground warehouse. But Elena wasn't alone in the vault. Dr. Patterson had been waiting for her, along with 3 other figures that made her enhanced senses recoil in recognition. They were like her, enhanced humans whose abilities had been pushed even further by newer generations of the compounds. "Welcome home, Elena," said Dr. Angela Morrison, whose familiar voice sent chills through Elena's consciousness. It was her former psychiatrist, but changed beyond recognition. Her eyes glowed with an inner light and her movements seemed to bend space around her. "Did you really think you were the only one who had undergone the complete transformation?" The revelation that Dr. Morrison had been enhanced from the beginning, possibly orchestrating Elena's entire journey, shattered Elena's understanding of her situation. "How long?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. 15 years, Dr. Morrison replied. "I was part of the first successful enhancement program. My psychological abilities were enhanced to the point where I could manipulate human behavior through careful therapeutic intervention. I guided you toward the Crystal Lake experiment because we needed a subject with your specific genetic markers." The other enhanced individuals in the vault represented different aspects of the research program. Dr. James Chen possessed enhanced analytical abilities that allowed him to process vast amounts of data instantly. Colonel Rebecca Nash, revealed to be Agent Nash's enhanced sister, had developed combat capabilities that made her a living weapon. And Dr. Patterson himself showed signs of enhancement that allowed him to interface directly with the facility's computer systems. "You were never fighting against the enhancement program," Dr. Morrison explained to Elena. "You were part of its final phase. Every action you've taken, every facility you've destroyed has been part of a larger plan to eliminate the older flawed research and concentrate the successful enhancements in a small group of post-human individuals." Elena's realization that she had been manipulated throughout her entire journey triggered a psychological break that caused her enhanced abilities to surge beyond their previous limits. The vault's reinforced walls began to crack under the electromagnetic pressure she generated, and the temperature dropped dramatically as her cellular structure destabilized. "The final protocol isn't about stopping enhanced humans," Dr. Patterson continued, his enhanced intellect allowing him to process Elena's emotional state and predict her responses. "It's about completing the transition from Homo sapiens to Homo superior. Normal humanity has served its purpose as an evolutionary stepping stone." Elena's rage at being manipulated was countered by her enhanced emotional control, creating an internal conflict that manifested as visible distortions in the air around her. "You're talking about genocide," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the enhanced humans step back involuntarily. "We're talking about evolution," Dr. Morrison corrected. "Normal humans will become extinct naturally as enhanced individuals reproduce and spread across the planet. We're simply accelerating a process that was always inevitable." The battle that erupted in the vault was unlike anything that had occurred in human history. 5 post-human beings with abilities that defied physical laws fought for control of research that could determine the future of the species.
Elena's electromagnetic abilities clashed with Dr. Chen's analytical predictions, while Colonel Nash's combat enhancements were countered by Elena's enhanced reflexes. The conflict ended when Elena made a decision that surprised even her enhanced opponents. Instead of trying to destroy the research, she absorbed it. Using her digital interface abilities, she downloaded the entire archive into her consciousness, becoming a living repository of every enhancement experiment ever conducted. If you want to eliminate normal humanity, Elena told the other enhanced beings as the vault collapsed around them, you'll have to go through me first. And now I have access to every weakness, every failure, and every countermeasure that has ever been developed. Elena's escape from the collapsing facility marked the beginning of a new phase in human evolution, one where the enhanced and the normal would have to find a way to coexist or risk mutual destruction in a war that could end both versions of humanity. 6 months after the destruction of the Cheyenne Mountain facility, Elena Marchetti stood on the observation deck of the Northern Institute, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Her enhanced vision could perceive electromagnetic spectrums invisible to normal humans, turning the simple sunrise into a symphony of energy that would have overwhelmed her original senses. The world had changed dramatically since the revelation of the enhancement programs. Elena's release of the complete research archive to international media had triggered a global crisis that forced governments to acknowledge decades of secret human experimentation. Enhanced individuals were no longer hiding in the shadows but were recognized as a new category of being that required entirely new legal and social frameworks. Dr. Sarah Chen found Elena on the observation deck, carrying 2 cups of coffee despite knowing that Elena's enhanced metabolism no longer required caffeine. It had become a ritual between them, a small gesture that maintained their connection across the growing divide between enhanced and normal humans. The Ethics Committee released their final recommendations today, Sarah said, handing Elena one of the cups. They're establishing the Enhanced Persons Protection Act, recognizing enhanced individuals as a protected class while acknowledging the security concerns they represent. Elena nodded, her enhanced consciousness processing the implications instantly. Segregation disguised as protection, she observed, though without the emotional bitterness that would have characterized her response months earlier. They're creating reserves for enhanced humans just like they once did for other groups they feared. The Enhanced Persons Protection Act was the government's attempt to manage a population that could no longer be controlled through conventional means. Enhanced individuals would be granted autonomous territories where they could live according to their own social structures, while agreeing to limit their involvement in normal human society. Elena's parents visited weekly, though each meeting highlighted the growing gulf between them. Margaret struggled to connect with her daughter's increasingly analytical approach to formerly emotional topics, while Robert found himself fascinated by Elena's expanded capabilities despite his sadness at losing the daughter he had known. "Do you miss being human?" Margaret asked during one of their conversations, a question that had been haunting her for months. Elena considered the question with the thoroughness that characterized her enhanced thinking. "I miss the simplicity of human emotions," she finally replied. "The way joy or sadness could overwhelm rational thought and make decisions for you. Now everything is calculated, weighed, and analyzed. It's more efficient, but it lacks the beautiful chaos of human feeling." The enhanced community that had formed around Elena included survivors from various research programs around the world. Markus Petrov had indeed survived the nuclear attack on the Moscow facility, his enhanced physiology allowing him to absorb and process radiation in ways that transformed him further. Chen Wei had established a research collective in international waters, working to understand and potentially reverse some aspects of enhancement. Dr. Morrison, the enhanced psychiatrist who had manipulated Elena's journey, had disappeared after the Cheyenne Mountain incident. Elena suspected she was working to establish a more radical enhanced community, one that viewed normal humans as an obsolete species that should be replaced rather than protected. Elena's role in the emerging enhanced society was that of a mediator and protector. Her absorption of the complete research archive made her a living library of enhancement knowledge, while her emotional struggles with her transformation gave her unique insight into the challenges facing other enhanced individuals. The most difficult cases were the recently enhanced individuals who had undergone transformation without proper psychological preparation. Elena worked with them in facilities designed to help enhanced humans adapt to their new capabilities while maintaining some connection to their human origins. The hardest part isn't learning to control new abilities, Elena explained to a group of newly enhanced individuals during one of her counseling sessions. It's learning to maintain your commitment to human values when you no longer feel human emotions the same way. Elena's research into potential reversal procedures had yielded mixed results. While certain aspects of enhancement could be suppressed or controlled, the fundamental genetic changes appeared to be permanent. Enhanced individuals would remain enhanced for the remainder of their extended lifespans, which could span centuries rather than decades. The question of reproduction haunted the enhanced community. Would enhanced humans produce enhanced offspring? Would they be compatible with normal humans? Early evidence suggested that enhanced genetics were dominant, meaning that any children of enhanced individuals would likely be enhanced themselves. Elena's relationship with normal humanity remained complex and evolving. She served as an unofficial ambassador between the enhanced and normal communities, helping to establish protocols for interaction and cooperation. Her unique position as the first publicly known enhanced individual made her a symbol of both hope and fear. The Northern Institute had been converted into a research facility focused on understanding enhancement and developing safeguards for both communities. Dr. Hartwell led a team that included both enhanced and normal scientists, working to ensure that enhancement technology was never again used without proper ethical oversight. As Elena watched the sunrise, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from a brilliant but ordinary scientist to something that existed between human and post-human. Her experiment with hibernation had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams and created a nightmare that would define the rest of human history. The crystalline formations in her bloodstream continued to evolve, suggesting that her transformation was far from complete. What she would become, what any of them would become, remained unknown. The enhanced represented humanity's future, but whether that future would be salvation or extinction was still being written. Elena's greatest fear wasn't that enhanced humans would replace normal humanity, but that in becoming something greater than human, they would lose everything that made humanity worth preserving in the first place. The challenge for Elena and others like her was to evolve beyond human limitations while maintaining human values, to become more than human without forgetting what it meant to be human. As the sun completed its rise, Elena finished her coffee and prepared for another day of navigating the complexities of a world where the line between human and post-human was becoming increasingly blurred. The future remained unwritten, and Elena was determined to help shape it in a way that honored both what humanity had been and what it might become. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.